Lai Min had always believed in living simply. Even now, as the morning light filtered through the cotton curtains of their modest apartment, she folded her clothes with the same care she had learned as a young girl in her small village. The apartment wasn't small by any means. It occupied the third floor of a nice building in a quiet neighborhood, but it lacked the extravagance one might expect from the wife of Huang Wei, one of Asia's wealthiest businessmen. Their love story had begun 15 years ago when Lai Min was working at her family's noodle shop. Huang Wei, then a rising entrepreneur with just 2 small tech companies to his name, had stumbled in during a rainstorm. He ordered the house special and stayed until closing time, captivated by the quiet confidence of the woman who served him with genuine smiles instead of the practiced flattery he'd grown accustomed to. "I don't need fancy things," Lai Min told him on their third date, sipping tea in a public park rather than the expensive restaurant he had suggested. "A good heart and honest work, these are what matter." Huang Wei had never met anyone like her, someone who saw through the growing wealth to the person he was trying to be. When he proposed 6 months later, he promised to respect her wishes to live without unnecessary luxury. It was a promise he had kept all these years, even as his business empire grew to include technology firms, real estate developments, and most recently, though Lai Min didn't know it yet, Pacific Skies Airlines. "Are you sure you don't want me to send a car for your mother?" Huang Wei asked, watching his wife pack a simple suitcase for her emergency trip. Her mother had fallen ill back in their hometown, and Lai Min was determined to be by her side as quickly as possible. "The bus to the airport is perfectly fine," Lai Min replied, carefully folding her everyday clothes. "Nothing designer, nothing flashy. You know how Mom feels about showing off. Besides, I'm more concerned about her health than travel arrangements." Huang Wei nodded, understanding both the women in his life perfectly. Lai Min's mother was cut from the same cloth, hardworking, practical, suspicious of displays of wealth. It was from her that Lai Min had learned to value substance over appearance. "I wish I could come with you," he said, genuine regret in his voice. "This overseas meeting has been planned for months." "Your work is important too," Lai Min assured him, patting his hand. "I'll call you when I arrive." What Lai Min didn't know was that Huang Wei had quietly arranged for their family doctor to be flown in to examine her mother. He respected her desire for simplicity but found small ways to ensure her comfort and security without undermining her independence. Similarly, she remained unaware that 3 months ago, Huang Wei had acquired Pacific Skies Airlines after learning about their poor treatment of economy passengers. "A company reflects its leadership," he had told his business partners. "If we want to build something lasting, we must value every customer, not just the ones who pay the most." The acquisition had been kept quiet. Huang Wei preferred to understand a company's inner workings before making public announcements or changes. He planned to tell Lai Min once he had improved the airline's service policies, knowing she would appreciate the transformation more than the purchase itself. As Lai Min zipped up her small suitcase, she glanced at their wedding photo, the only personal item displayed in their living room. In it, they stood not before an elaborate backdrop, but under a simple cherry tree in bloom. Huang Wei wore a modest suit while she had chosen a simple white dress that her mother had helped alter. "I'll be back in a few days," Lai Min said, kissing her husband goodbye at their door. She refused his offer to call a taxi, insisting the bus was perfectly fine. Huang Wei watched her leave, admiring how after all these years, success and wealth had never changed her. He turned back to their apartment, comfortable but modest, and smiled. His phone buzzed with messages about his newly acquired airline, which his wife would soon be boarding, completely unaware that her husband's name was now on her boarding pass in tiny corporate print. The airport buzzed with activity as Lai Min joined the check-in line for Pacific Skies Airlines. She clutched her small, well-worn suitcase, the same one she'd had since college. Around her, business travelers tapped impatiently on their phones while tourists argued over baggage allowances. Lai Min simply waited her turn, watching people with quiet interest. When she finally reached the counter, the airline worker barely looked up from her computer. "Economy, seat 32B, she said, sliding the boarding pass across the counter. Lai Min thanked her with a genuine smile that went unnoticed. Lai Min checked the time, still 2 hours before boarding. Her mother had taught her to always arrive early, a habit that had served her well throughout life. Better to wait than to rush, she could almost hear her mother saying. The thought made her chest tighten with worry. The phone call from her cousin had been brief but concerning. Mother was stable but weak. The doctors weren't sure what was wrong. Finding a quiet corner in the busy terminal, Lei Min pulled out her simple phone, not the latest model, though Huang Wei had offered to buy her one countless times. She dialed her husband's number. I'm at the airport now, she told him when he answered. The flight leaves in 2 hours. Did you eat anything? Huang Wei asked, concern warming his voice despite being halfway across the world in London. She could hear the bustle of his business meeting in the background. I had a bun from the shop near our apartment, Lei Min replied. Don't worry about me. Focus on your meeting. It's wrapping up earlier than expected, Huang Wei said, glancing at his watch. An idea was forming in his mind, but he kept it to himself. Call me when you land, okay, no matter what time. After they hung up, Huang Wei immediately called his assistant. Cancel my meetings for the next 3 days, he instructed, and book me on the next flight to Chengdu. If his timing was right, he might be able to surprise Lei Min and support her during her mother's illness. Meanwhile, Lei Min found a small tea shop in the terminal and ordered the cheapest option on the menu. As she sipped her tea, she noticed a mother struggling with a crying baby and a toddler who was running in circles around their luggage. Without hesitation, Lei Min approached them. May I help? She offered. I used to be a kindergarten teacher. The exhausted mother looked up with grateful eyes. Could you just watch our bags while I take my son to the bathroom? This little one just fell asleep. For the next 20 minutes, Lei Min entertained the toddler with paper folding games while the baby slept peacefully in the stroller. When the mother returned, she tried to give Lei Min some money as thanks. No need, Lei Min said, waving away the cash. We all need help sometimes. When boarding time finally arrived, Lei Min joined the long line of economy passengers. She watched as first-class travelers were welcomed aboard with warm smiles and offers of champagne. One woman with designer luggage complained loudly about having to wait an extra minute while the gate agent resolved an issue with another passenger's ticket. Lei Min felt no envy as she observed the first-class passengers. Her father had always said, true wealth isn't what's in your wallet, but what's in your heart. She believed this deeply, even after 15 years of marriage to one of the richest men in Asia. The flight was packed. As Lei Min made her way down the narrow aisle to her seat, she noticed several empty spots in first class. A flight attendant named May, according to her name tag, guided passengers efficiently but without warmth. Lei Min settled into her middle seat, carefully placing her small bag under the seat in front. An elderly man sat by the window, already dozing, while a large businessman took the aisle seat, immediately claiming both armrests. Just as Lei Min was taking out a book, a collection of folk tales her mother had loved, the airplane intercom crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Pacific Skies Airlines Flight 372 to Chengdu. We're expecting some turbulence today, so please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened when the sign is illuminated. Lei Min buckled her seatbelt and opened her book, unaware that at that very moment her husband was racing to catch a flight that would put him on the same plane, and that the airline carrying them both now belonged to him. The plane had been in the air for about an hour when the trouble started. Lei Min was still reading her book, occasionally glancing at the elderly man beside her who had woken up and was now staring anxiously out the window. The businessman on her other side had fallen asleep, his body tilted toward her, taking up more than his fair share of space. Suddenly, a commotion erupted several rows ahead. A well-dressed man in his 50s was clutching his chest, his face pale and sweaty. The flight attendant, May, rushed to his side. Is there a doctor on board? May called out, her professional calm slipping just slightly. A woman rose from economy class and made her way forward. I'm a nurse, she said. After a quick examination, she looked up at May. He needs to lie down. It might be his heart. The man was in first class, where the seats were wider and more comfortable. May spoke briefly with her supervisor, a stern-looking man named Director Wu, who nodded curtly. We need to recline his seat fully, Director Wu announced. And we'll need the adjacent seat as well. He scanned the cabin, then consulted his passenger list. Lei Min watched the scene unfold with concern. The man's face reminded her of her father's before he passed away 5 years ago, the same grey pallor, the same pained expression. She silently wished him well. Meanwhile, in a private cabin at the front of the plane, Huan Wei had boarded at the last minute, using his influence to secure a seat without Lai Min knowing. He had arranged with the crew to surprise her mid-flight, planning to join her for the remainder of the journey. When he heard about the medical emergency, he stayed in his cabin but kept informed through his personal flight attendant. Back in the main cabin, Director Wu approached May. "We need to move someone from economy to the empty first-class seat beside Mrs. Zhao. It will give us room to attend to Mr. Fang." Mi nodded and began scanning the economy section. Her eyes fell on Li Min, who sat quietly reading her book, dressed in simple clothes, but with a calm dignity about her. "How about her?" May suggested quietly to Director Wu. "She seems kind and undemanding." Director Wu frowned as he looked at Lai Min's modest appearance and economy ticket. No. First class has certain standards. Look for someone more suitable." His eyes fixed on a loud woman wearing flashy jewelry who had been complaining since boarding. May hesitated, then approached Li Min anyway. "Excuse me, ma'am. Would you mind moving to first class? We have a medical situation and need to rearrange some passengers." Lai Min looked up from her book. "Of course I don't mind, but..." She glanced at the elderly man beside her. "Perhaps this gentleman would benefit more from the comfortable seat. He seems unwell himself." The elderly man shook his head. No. I'm fine, just old," he said with a small smile. "You go." Director Wu had noticed Mi's disobedience and quickly intervened. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said coldly. "We've selected another passenger." He gestured to the bejeweled woman, who was already gathering her things with a triumphant expression. "First class is where I belong anyway," the woman announced loudly as she moved forward, not bothering to thank anyone. Mi gave Li Min an apologetic look. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's no problem at all," Li Min assured her quietly. "I'm comfortable here." What Li Min didn't hear was Director Wu's comment as he walked away. "First class has standards to maintain. We can't just let anyone in, especially not someone who looks like she shops at discount stores." A young flight attendant trailing behind them looked uncomfortable but said nothing. In his private cabin, Huan Wei received an update from his personal attendant. "Sir, there was a situation with a passenger needing medical attention. They've moved some people around." "Is everyone all right?" Huan Wei asked, concerned. "Yes, sir. The passenger is stable." But the attendant hesitated. "I noticed your wife was almost offered a first-class seat, but Director Wu intervened and chose someone else because of how she was dressed." Huan Wei's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. "I see," he said quietly. "Please continue to monitor the situation and find out everything you can about Director Wu and the flight attendant who tried to help my wife." As the plane continued its journey, Li Min remained in her economy seat, completely unaware of the drama surrounding her. She helped the elderly man with his meal tray when it arrived and shared her extra pillow with him. In first class, the bejeweled woman was loudly demanding more champagne, while the ill passenger was now sleeping comfortably across two seats. And in his private cabin, Huan Wei began making calls, setting into motion events that would change the airline forever. All because someone had judged his wife by her appearance rather than her character. Huan Wei sat in his private cabin, his face calm but his mind racing. Through the small window, he could see clouds drifting by, but his thoughts were focused entirely on what his attendant had just told him. He had never been a man to show anger easily, preferring instead to channel his emotions into purposeful action. "Tell me more about this Director Wu," he said to his personal attendant, a loyal employee named Jian, who had been with him for over a decade. Jian consulted his tablet. "He's been with Pacific Skies for 15 years. Started as a regular flight attendant, worked his way up. His performance reviews are mixed." Jian hesitated before continuing. "There have been several complaints about his treatment of economy passengers, but they were all dismissed." "And the attendant who tried to help my wife?" Huan Wei asked, his voice softer now. "Her name is Mei Lin, 3 years with the company. Excellent reviews from passengers, but has been passed over for promotion twice." Notes in her file suggest she's too friendly with economy class and lacks proper boundary maintenance with lower-tier customers. Huang Wei's eyes narrowed slightly. Those were the exact words used. Jian nodded. Yes, sir. Huang Wei stood and walked to the small window. And who wrote those notes? Director Wu, sir. A silence fell between them. Huang Wei didn't need to express his displeasure out loud. Jian had known him long enough to understand. What would you like me to do, sir? Jian finally asked. Nothing yet. I want to observe more before I act. Huang Wei turned from the window. I'd like to see how my wife is being treated without interference. Can you arrange for me to view the main cabin without being noticed? Meanwhile, Lei Min was helping the elderly man beside her with his lunch tray. The airline food was bland, but she had brought some small packets of spices in her bag, a habit from her childhood when her family couldn't afford to eat out and would bring their own seasonings to make simple meals taste better. Try a little of this, she suggested, offering a tiny paper envelope of mixed spices to the old man. My mother makes it herself. It makes everything taste like home. The elderly man, who had introduced himself as Mr. Chen, sprinkled some on his food and took a bite. His eyes widened with pleasure. Wonderful. Your mother must be an excellent cook. Lai Min smiled, a shadow crossing her face. She is. I hope she's feeling better by the time I arrive. In the aisle, Mei was pushing the meal cart, looking tired but maintaining a friendly demeanor with each passenger. When she reached Li Min and Mr. Chen, she paused a moment longer than necessary. How is everything? She asked, her question seemingly about the food, but her eyes conveying a deeper apology. Very good, thank you, Lai Min replied warmly. And how is the gentleman who was feeling unwell? Mei looked surprised by the question. Most passengers wouldn't have bothered to ask. He's stable. The captain has requested a medical team to meet us when we land. I'm glad to hear it, Lai Min said sincerely. From a discreet position near the galley, Huang Wei watched this exchange. He had slipped out of his private cabin when Jian had informed him that meal service had begun. Dressed in a simple jacket that concealed his expensive suit, he blended in with the crew members who were busy preparing desserts. What he saw both warmed and troubled him. His wife was exactly as she had always been, kind, thoughtful, genuine. The way Mei treated her with a special warmth was telling, as was the way Director Wu brushed past the economy section, his eyes barely registering the passengers as he checked on the first-class cabin. As Huang Wei continued to observe, he noticed a pattern. The younger staff, like Mei, treated all passengers with respect, though they were clearly instructed to prioritize first class. The older staff, particularly those who worked closely with Director Wu, mirrored his dismissive attitude toward economy passengers. Using the plane's secure phone line, Huang Wei made a call to the airline headquarters. This is Mr. Huang, he said quietly. I need the complete employment files for all senior cabin crew members, particularly anyone who has been with the company more than 10 years. He paused, listening. Yes, I understand it's unusual. You have 1 hour. After hanging up, he returned to his private cabin where Jian was waiting with a tablet. Sir, I've compiled some information you might find interesting, Jian said, handing over the device. There's a pattern in passenger complaints that corresponds with certain crew assignments. Huang Wei scrolled through the data, his expression growing more determined with each swipe. This has been happening for years, he murmured. A culture of discrimination based on ticket class, appearance, perceived wealth. Yes, sir, and it seems to have gotten worse since Pacific Skies started struggling financially. They've been cutting corners in economy service while maintaining standards in first class. Huang Wei set the tablet down. That ends today. He looked out the window again, watching as they began their descent through the clouds. But first, I want to see how my wife is treated when we land. No special treatment, no intervention. I want to see the true face of the airline in our own. As the plane began its final approach, Li Min secured her small bag and helped Mr. Chen with his seatbelt. She was unaware that her husband was watching, unaware that the airline belonged to him, and completely unaware that this ordinary flight was about to change everything. The plane touched down with a gentle bump. Lai Min gathered her few belongings and helped Mr. Chen with his small bag. Around them, Passengers rushed to stand up despite the seatbelt sign still glowing overhead. "There's never any hurry," Mr. Chen said with a chuckle. "We all reach the same place eventually." Lyman smiled. "My mother says the same thing." As they waited for the crowd to thin, Director Wu passed by on his final cabin check. His eyes swept over the economy section with barely concealed impatience. When he reached Li Min's row, he glanced at her simple clothes and well-worn bag, then quickly looked away as if she wasn't worth noticing. What Director Wu didn't realize was that Huan Wei was watching this interaction from a few rows behind, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. When the passengers were finally allowed to disembark, Li Min and Mr. Chen waited their turn. Ahead of them, the bejeweled woman who had been moved to first class pushed her way forward, knocking into a young mother who was struggling with a baby carrier. "Excuse you," the woman snapped, not even bothering to look back. Li Min hurried forward to steady the young mother. "Are you okay? Here, let me help you with that." She adjusted the baby carrier strap that had slipped off the woman's shoulder. The young mother gave her a grateful look. "Thank you. It's my first time flying with him." As they moved toward the exit, May was standing by the door, saying goodbye to passengers. When Li Min approached, May's professional smile warmed into something more genuine. "Thank you for flying with us today," May said, then added in a lower voice, "and thank you for your kindness to Mr. Chen. He's my regular passenger. Flies to see his grandchildren every month." Li Min nodded. "It was my pleasure. He reminds me of my father." As Li Min stepped into the jet bridge, she was surprised to see a familiar figure waiting just beyond the aircraft door. For a moment, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. "Huan Wei," she gasped, quickening her pace. "What are you doing here?" "You're meeting in London." Huan Wei embraced his wife, his face lighting up with genuine happiness. "It ended early. I wanted to surprise you." He looked into her eyes. "How was your flight?" "Fine, nothing special," Li Min said, then remembered Mr. Chen. She turned to introduce them, but the elderly man had already moved ahead, giving them privacy. Behind them, Director Wu emerged from the aircraft and froze in his tracks. The color drained from his face as he recognized Huan Wei. His face had been in the business news frequently enough, even if his ownership of the airline had been kept quiet. "Mr. Huang," Director Wu stammered. "What an unexpected pleasure." Huan Wei turned slowly, his arms still around his wife's shoulders. "Director Wu, isn't it?" His voice was pleasant enough, but his eyes were cool. Director Wu nodded nervously. "Yes, sir. I wasn't aware you would be traveling with us today." "I wasn't traveling with you," Huan Wei replied. "I was observing." Li Min looked between the two men, confusion clear on her face. "Huan Wei, what's going on? How do you know this man?" Before Huan Wei could answer, May appeared at the aircraft door. When she saw Huan Wei, her eyes widened in recognition, and she quickly lowered her gaze. "Mr. Huang," she said softly, "welcome." Other crew members had gathered now, whispering among themselves. The bejeweled woman who had taken the first-class seat paused to watch the scene, curiosity getting the better of her. Huan Wei smiled at his wife. "Li Min, there's something I haven't told you." He turned to address the gathered airline staff. 3 months ago, I purchased Pacific Skies Airlines." A collective gasp went up from the crew. Director Wu's face went from pale to ashen. "You own the airline?" Li Min asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." Huan Wei said simply. "I wanted to improve it before telling you. It was going to be a surprise." "But why would you buy an airline?" Li Min asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because I heard reports of how they treated their economy passengers," Huan Wei explained. "I wanted to see for myself if it was true." He looked directly at Director Wu. "And now I have." Director Wu swallowed hard. "Sir, if there was any issue with service today, I assure you." "We'll discuss it." Huan Wei cut him off, his voice firm but not angry. "Not here. I'd like everyone involved in today's flight crew to meet us in the VIP lounge in 30 minutes. Li Min was still processing everything. "So you were on the same flight, watching me?" Huan Wei nodded. "I wanted to see how you would be treated as an ordinary passenger. No special attention, no preferential treatment." He squeezed her hand. "And I saw exactly what I needed to see." As they walked together toward the terminal, Leaving a group of stunned airline employees behind them, Li Min shook her head in disbelief. "All these years," she said, "and you can still surprise me." "That works both ways," Huan Wei replied with a smile. "You've taught me more about dignity and respect than any business school ever could. And now, it's time for this airline to learn the same lesson." The VIP lounge of the airport was quiet and luxurious, with soft lighting and comfortable furniture. Li Min had never been in such a place before, and she looked around with curious eyes as she took a seat beside her husband. Across from them sat Director Wu, his face still pale, and beside him Mei, who kept her eyes respectfully lowered. Several other crew members stood nervously around the room, including the young flight attendant who had witnessed Director Wu's dismissive comment about Li Min earlier. "Please, everyone take a seat," Huan Wei said, his voice calm and measured. "This isn't a firing squad." The crew members exchanged glances and slowly found places to sit. Li Min noticed how they automatically arranged themselves by rank, with senior staff claiming the better seats, while junior staff stood back or perched on the edges of chairs. "First," Huan Wei began, "I want to thank you all for your service today. Running an airline is difficult work, and I appreciate your dedication." Director Wu's shoulders relaxed slightly at these words. However, Huan Wei continued, "I observed something today that troubles me deeply." He turned to his wife. "Li Min, would you mind sharing your experience on the flight today?" Li Min looked surprised. "Me, but nothing special happened." "Exactly," Huan Wei said with a small smile. "Please tell them about your journey." Li Min glanced around at the faces watching her. She had never been comfortable being the center of attention, but she trusted her husband. "Well, I checked in, boarded the plane, and sat in my assigned seat in economy class. The gentleman next to me, Mr. Chen, was very kind. We talked a little. When there was a medical emergency, many here came to ask if I would move to first class, but then," she hesitated. Director Wu shifted uncomfortably. "Then what, Li Min?" Huan Wei encouraged gently. "Then there was a change of plans, and another passenger was selected instead." Li Min shrugged. "It wasn't a problem. I was comfortable where I was." Huan Wei nodded and turned to the young flight attendant who had been standing quietly near the back. "You were there when Director Wu made the decision to choose another passenger. What did you hear him say?" The young woman, who couldn't have been more than 25, looked terrified. Her eyes darted to Director Wu, who gave her a warning glance. "It's okay," Huan Wei assured her. "Please speak freely. No one will be punished for honesty today." The young woman took a deep breath. He said first class has standards to maintain, and that Mrs. Huang looked like she shops at discount stores. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Li Min's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't look angry, just surprised. "I see," Huan Wei said, his voice still calm. "Director Wu, would you like to explain your thinking?" All eyes turned to Director Wu, whose face had now flushed red. "Mr. Huang, I had no idea who she was. If I had known she was your wife—" "That's not the point," Huan Wei interrupted, raising his hand. "If she had been any other passenger dressed simply, would your decision have been different?" The room fell silent. Director Wu looked down at his hands. "I've been reviewing passenger complaints and employee records," Huan Wei continued. "It seems this isn't an isolated incident. There appears to be a culture within Pacific Skies of judging passengers by their appearance, their clothing, their perceived wealth." Mei finally spoke up. "Sir, if I may." She waited for Huan Wei's nod before continuing. "Some of us have tried to change this, but we've been told repeatedly that first-class passengers pay more and deserve special treatment. Those of us who treat economy passengers with too much attention get passed over for promotions or assigned to less desirable routes." Several other junior staff members nodded in agreement. Li Min looked troubled. "Is this true?" she asked Director Wu directly. The man couldn't meet her eyes. "We have limited resources. We have to prioritize." "Prioritizing is one thing," Huan Wei said. "Discriminating is another." He stood up and walked to the center of the room. "I didn't buy this airline just as a business investment. I bought it because I believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of what they're wearing or how much they paid for their ticket." Lai Min watched her husband with pride. This was the man she had fallen in love with, not because of his wealth or success, but because of his heart. Starting today, Huan Wei continued, things will change at Pacific Skies, not through firings or punishment, but through a complete shift in our values. He looked at Director Wu. Even those who have made mistakes deserve a chance to learn and grow. Director Wu looked up, surprise clear on his face. I'm establishing a new training program, Huan Wei announced. Every employee, from pilots to ground crew, will participate. And I'd like you, Li Min, to help design it. Me? Li Min asked, genuinely shocked. But I know nothing about airlines. You know everything about treating people with kindness and respect, Huan Wei replied. And that's what matters most. As the meeting continued, plans were made and ideas shared. Lai Min watched in amazement as her husband transformed what could have been a moment of anger and retribution into an opportunity for growth and change. And around the room, she saw hope dawning on the faces of crew members who had longed for a more compassionate workplace. By the time they left the airport, the sun was setting, casting golden light across the city. Lai Min still needed to visit her mother, but now she carried with her not just concern for her family, but also the unexpected weight of a new responsibility, helping to reshape an entire company's culture. 1 year had passed since that fateful flight. Lai Min stood at the window of her mother's house, watching the autumn leaves dance in the breeze. Her mother, now fully recovered from her illness, was bustling around the kitchen preparing tea. Your husband is coming today? Her mother asked, setting out the simple clay teapot she had used for decades. Yes, Lai Min replied with a smile. His flight lands in an hour. Her mother nodded approvingly. That airline of his is different now. Everyone in the village talks about it. Old Mrs. Zheng's son flew home last month and said even the economy seats felt like first class. Lai Min laughed softly. Huan Wei would be pleased to hear that. The past year had brought many changes. After visiting her mother, Li Min had thrown herself into the project Huan Wei had entrusted to her, reimagining customer service at Pacific Skies Airlines. What began as a simple training program had evolved into a complete company transformation. Lai Min remembered the first training session she had led, standing nervously before a room of skeptical airline staff. She had brought no fancy presentations, no corporate jargon, just stories from her childhood, lessons her parents had taught her about treating everyone with dignity regardless of their status. My father was a factory worker, she had told them. Once he saved for months to buy my mother a simple gold necklace for their anniversary. When they went to the jewelry store, the clerk ignored them because of their plain clothes, assuming they couldn't afford anything. Another store welcomed them warmly, and that's where they spent their hard-earned money. My father never forgot how it felt to be judged by his appearance. That simple story had resonated more than any corporate speech could have. Director Wu, who had been sitting at the back with arms crossed, had approached her afterward. I used to be like your father, he had admitted quietly. When I first started as a flight attendant, I was from a poor village. The way the first-class passengers looked down on me. I swore I'd be on the other side someday. Somewhere along the way, I became what I once hated. That conversation had marked the beginning of an unexpected alliance. Director Wu, with his years of airline experience, and Lai Min, with her innate understanding of human dignity, had worked together to craft a new service approach. He had become one of the program's most passionate advocates, often sharing his own journey as a cautionary tale. The sound of a car outside pulled Li Min from her memories. She watched as her husband stepped out, dressed simply in slacks and a button-down shirt. No one in the village would guess he was one of the country's wealthiest businessmen. How was the flight? Li Min asked as Huan Wei entered and greeted her mother with a respectful bow. Perfect, he replied with a knowing smile. I was in economy, of course. This had become his habit, traveling incognito in economy class on his own airline, observing the service and talking with passengers. The staff never knew when their boss might be among them, which kept everyone on their toes. After tea, Li Min and Huan Wei walked through the village, greeting neighbors and stopping to chat with old friends. I received the latest customer satisfaction reports yesterday, Huan Wei said as they paused by the small village pond. Pacific Skies has the highest ratings in our history. profits are up to, despite the extra training costs. Lai Min nodded, watching a family of ducks glide across the water. People can feel when they're truly valued. They come back. The board wants to create an award, Huang Wei continued. The Lai Min Excellence in Service Award, given annually to employees who demonstrate exceptional compassion. Lai Min shook her head, embarrassed. That's not necessary. It's already decided, Huang Wei said with a gentle smile. And the first recipient will be Mei. She's been promoted to head of customer experience. And Director Wu? Li Min asked. He's requested to lead our new mentorship program, pairing senior staff with new hires to teach them our values from day one. Huang Wei took his wife's hand. He says working with you changed everything for him. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the village, they made their way back to her mother's house. Neighbors waved from their doorways, children ran playing through the streets, and the simple beauty of life unfolded around them. You know, Huang Wei said thoughtfully, I've built skyscrapers and launched tech companies, but nothing has made me prouder than what we've done with the airline. Lai Min squeezed his hand. Because buildings and products don't have hearts, people do. That night, as they prepared to return to the city, Lai Min packed her same simple suitcase. She had not changed her wardrobe or her habits, despite her husband's success. Her mother watched with approval. You stayed true to yourself, the older woman said. That's why you could change an entire company. You reminded them of what matters. The next morning, as they boarded the plane back to the city, Li Min took her seat in economy class. The flight attendant, recognizing her, offered an upgrade, but Lai Min politely declined. Uncomfortable here, she said with a smile, settling into her seat and helping an elderly woman with her seatbelt. After all, it had never been about where she sat on the plane. It had always been about how people treated each other along the journey.